So where would you say your focus is right now on real estate?
It's the U.S. It's the U.S. and it's syndicating out equity in the properties that we acquire out in the U.S.
Okay, so tell me about your getting started in real estate and scaling your portfolio.
So obviously, you know my story from early on. You know, my mom's family coming from poverty from Portugal. You know, my dad's grandfather coming from Ireland and poor as well. My parents didn't have much, and it was mostly my mom's family that was a big believer that, if you have money, life will be easier. And I'm not talking about, they weren't, referencing, you have to be rich. They were just saying, if you have money or whatever. So from a very early on age, I saved everything that I could. I worked as many jobs, many hours as I possibly could. And then, got into school, secondary, post-education, dropped out, started a supplement company, started a website. Website was not doing well. I ended up opening a store in response to the website not doing well. Ended up meeting the owner of the strip mall plaza, my buddy now, Marco. Mm-hmm. And that kind of was the kicker into me getting into real estate, because he was a very big landlord at the time. But even prior to that, I remember reading a book. Actually, what sparked my interest in real estate was reading a book or an article or something like that mentioned along the lines of the majority of self-made millionaires. Now, I don't remember if it was the majority of self-made millionaires came from real estate or the majority of self-made millionaires own real estate. Regardless, it didn't matter to me, or it doesn't matter to me now. That's what kind of piqued my interest, because I really didn't know what to do. I ended up sitting down with Marco, the owner of that strip mall plaza, and I ended up buying my first package of real estate, which was 14 condos, with the $180,000 that I had saved from working all of these jobs, like
over like a 10-year period.
Over a 10-year period. And I'm talking about saving all my birthday money, Christmas money, like everything. Mm-hmm. Like I saved. I didn't go on any vacations with my friends. A lot of people go to Cancun or Acapulco. I didn't go any of that stuff. I didn't go on any vacations. Even when I was bouncing downtown Windsor as like another job, I ended up getting that job so I can convince my friends to go to the bar that I worked at to still be able to party with them while I was earning an income. Working at the bar.
So how much was the purchase price of the condo package?
Purchase price was, for the 14, was $938,000, and I had saved $188,000 to, purchase a package of, or the portfolio of condos, which was at that time about an 80-20 LTV. Mm-hmm. I had gotten 14 residential mortgages on that property, which is one of the reasons why the LTV was so strong at the time. And that was when, the banks, this was with RBC, they didn't have any restrictions on the amount of personal mortgages that you could hold. And
then what was and so obviously you had a good experience from owning that portfolio, because you went on to own or buy a lot more real estate after that. What was kind of like your second venture in real estate after that?
Yeah. So the second, this is, I guess, the timeline of how the real estate market worked for me, at least in Windsor. So in the beginning, what ended up happening was, back in Windsor, now consider this as well. Back when I bought those condos, this was 2008. Mm-hmm. Market was a ghost town in Windsor. Everybody was scared. Vacancy rate was probably about 15%. Even approaching maybe even 20. It was crazy here. It was a ghost town. But things would still cash flow because things were so cheap. After buying that portfolio of condos, I ended up going into single family residences. And it was at a time when you could go in and not do a whole lot and the property would cash flow. You were buying homes for sometimes even under $100,000. Mm-hmm. The market started to rapidly move, though. And I guess not necessarily rapidly, but it doesn't take much to move a house from, say, $100,000 to $120,000. but that's a 20% increase,
Right.
roughly, right? So things started to kind of happen, right? Because we had hit the bottom. The Great Recession took down Windsor, Ontario, because Windsor, Ontario was heavily reliant on the automotive industry. So it hit rock bottom, and then it started to come up out of rock bottom. So after being able to only buy rental properties and not do a whole lot, you had to kind of graduate from simply buying and renting to buying, adding some lipstick and then renting. Then that transitioned from, and then the market still picked up. This might be in between, maybe 08 and 2012. Then, approaching 2015, it was kind of maybe more of like the lipstick era. And then maybe like a year or two after that, it was more heavier renovations, maybe changing cabinetry, maybe changing flooring out, maybe vanities. And then after that, it started to becoming more of a gut job to, significant value add, removing walls, changing almost everything in the house, rearranging bathrooms, or whatever, rearranging kitchens, and opening the house up a little bit more open concept. So it started to get a little bit more heavier. Then it got to the point where that actually stopped working as well. And how
many single family homes do you think you went through between the years of like 2010 to maybe call it 2017, 2018, as you were graduating through all these levels?
I would probably say at that point, 2018, is that what you said?
Or kind of when you finished buying single family homes?
Oh, I still buy. I still bought one last year. But I would say the bulk of them, I probably went through probably close to a couple hundred, if not a little bit more, over the course of probably a 10-year span between 08 and 2018.
Mm-hmm. And then after, like you said, you were kind of graduated then even to like a further type of property. What did you find when returns were kind of getting squeezed then on the single family? What'd you move to next?
I moved to industrial. And the reason why I moved to industrial is because I started to look at the returns that I first got when I was, first acquiring the bulk of my real estate portfolio, even doing, heavier renovations. And I was looking at the returns, and, a lot of the returns were double digit returns, and, even cash flow, cash on cash returns were getting into double digits, especially earlier on. So I started looking at the market, what type of property would still be able to get me those returns. And really the only one that would be able to get me that was industrial. And then I realized something, the economy was like exploding, right? And, I've never been a big, advocate of retail. Owning an e-commerce business, I'm in the business to put retail brick and mortar out of business. And office, I've never loved office anyways, because let's face it, in the digital era, in the work from home era, even though I don't necessarily am a big advocate of it, it's a dying type of real estate, I feel. So for me, especially in a booming economy, people will always need product, and product is always made in commercial industrial spaces. So I ended up buying industrial spaces.
Over that stretch of time, how many industrial properties did you acquire?
Bought about 5. Yeah, bought about 5 properties. Sold one. And within, on that particular deal, I remember buying that property. It was on County Road 42. I rented it out for a year. I actually was buying that property to potentially move one of our businesses into it. That didn't work out. We ended up shifting, and that property, I ended up buying it for $1.2 million. I sold that for $2.2 literally 1 year later, while also realizing a double-digit cash-on-cash return as well for the entire year. That was a really good buy.
And then at what point in time did you then transition to even looking stateside?
I started to transition looking stateside when even the industrial property started to run wild in the area. So I stopped buying industrial properties. I only went really heavy buying industrial properties for maybe a 3-year period. I would say probably maybe 2016 to 2020. And it got to the point where even industrial properties were getting I was getting priced out of the market in terms of the returns that I wanted, right? So then because of that, and in response to that, I started looking into the States. And then in the beginning of February 2020, I bought Canton Manor in Canton, Michigan.
And that was your first large multifamily in the States.
Exactly. It was a 56 unit senior community, 55 plus. Yeah.
And then, so over the course of your, call it 15-year real estate journey, how much real estate have you acquired in terms of total assets under management?
I would say, since my first purchase back in 2008, it's been, well over $100 million.
So where would you say your focus is right now on real estate?
It's the U.S. It's the U.S. and it's syndicating out equity in the properties that we acquire out in the U.S.
So bringing on investors to invest alongside these properties.
Yeah, and the reason why is because when I bought Canton Manor, I had a few close family and friends take notice, and they wanted in on the deal. And, that clicked to me that there wasn't really anybody offering this type of service in the country. And what we ended up doing was building out the logistics and the infrastructure to be able to allow Canadians to invest in U.S. real estate.
And that one's called Coachwood Capital, is that right?
Coachwood Capital is the company.
And what would you say is then now your goals kind of over the next, call it 5 to 10 years?
To bring in like-minded investors to grow the portfolio to $1 billion under management.